The steady beeping of medical monitors echoed through the dimly lit pediatric ICU at St. Mary's Hospital. It was another quiet night shift, and Nurse Jennifer Hayes found herself drawn once again to room 304, where 6-year-old Sarah Matthews lay motionless. The little girl's small frame seemed even tinier amid the tangle of tubes and wires that had become her lifeline over the past 3 weeks. Jennifer adjusted the blanket covering Sarah, her movements gentle and practiced. The girl's long brown hair, usually kept neat in pigtails according to the family photos by her bedside, now lay spread across the white hospital pillow. Dark lashes rested against pale cheeks that had once been rosy with childhood vitality before the accident changed everything. "Good evening, sweetheart," Jennifer whispered, maintaining her routine of talking to Sarah despite the lack of response. She had been doing this since the day the ambulance brought the child in, broken and unconscious after the devastating car crash that had nearly claimed her life. The accident had happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Sarah had been riding in the backseat of her mother's car, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, when a truck lost control on the slippery road. The collision had left Sarah with severe head trauma and multiple injuries. While her physical wounds were healing, she remained trapped in a deep coma that left doctors increasingly concerned. Jennifer checked Sarah's vital signs, recording them in her chart with meticulous care. After 12 years as a pediatric nurse, she had developed a special sense about her patients. Something about Sarah's case touched her deeply, perhaps because the girl reminded her of her own niece. Through the window, Jennifer could see Sarah's parents, Margaret and David Matthews, sleeping uncomfortably in the waiting room chairs. They had barely left the hospital since the accident, taking turns staying with their daughter. The strain of their vigil showed in their tired faces and rumpled clothes. "Your mom and dad love you so much, Sarah," Jennifer said softly, adjusting the IV drip. "They're right outside, waiting for you to wake up." The night shift was usually quiet, broken only by the routine checks and the soft conversations of the medical staff. Jennifer used these peaceful hours to spend extra time with her patients, especially Sarah. She would read stories from the child's favorite books that her parents had brought in, hoping that somewhere in the depths of unconsciousness, Sarah could hear her voice. As she worked, Jennifer's mind wandered to the other cases she had seen over the years. Some children had awakened from comas with remarkable stories to tell, while others never opened their eyes again. The uncertainty was the hardest part of her job, but she never let it dim her hope or affect the care she provided. Tonight felt different somehow. Jennifer couldn't explain it, but there was a change in the air, a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. She had learned to trust these instincts over her years of nursing, though she kept such feelings to herself to maintain her professional reputation. Looking at Sarah's monitors, Jennifer noticed small fluctuations in the brain activity readings. They weren't significant enough to alert the doctors yet, but they were there, tiny sparks of hope in the electronic displays. She made careful notes of these changes, documenting everything with the thoroughness that had earned her the respect of the medical team. Dr. Williams, the pediatric neurologist in charge of Sarah's case, had warned them all not to expect too much too soon. "Coma recovery is a marathon, not a sprint," he would say during his rounds. But Jennifer had seen enough medical mysteries to know that sometimes hope appeared in the most unexpected moments. As her shift continued, Jennifer completed her duties while keeping a watchful eye on Sarah. She spoke to the girl about simple things: the weather, the kind nurse who would take over in the morning, the cards and drawings from Sarah's first-grade classmates that decorated the walls. "Sweet dreams, little one," Jennifer said as she prepared to check on her other patients. "I'll be back soon." She didn't know it yet, but this ordinary night was about to become anything but routine. In the quiet hours that followed, something extraordinary would unfold in room 304, something that would challenge everything Jennifer thought she knew about life, death, and the mysteries that lay between them. T2. The clock on the wall of the pediatric EQ showed 2:15 a.m. when Jennifer noticed the first change. She had just finished her rounds and was updating patient charts at the nurse's station when something caught her attention. The monitors in Sarah's room showed subtle but distinct variations in the girl's vital signs. Jennifer walked quickly to room 304, her rubber-soled shoes making soft squeaking sounds on the polished floor. As she approached Sarah's bed, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. The girl's fingers were twitching slightly, the first voluntary movement since the accident. "Dr. Williams," Jennifer called out, trying to keep her voice steady as she pressed the call button. "We need you in room 304 immediately." The night shift doctor arrived within minutes, his white coat fluttering as he hurried into the room. Jennifer pointed out the changes she had observed, and Dr. Williams began a thorough examination. Sarah's parents, awakened by the sudden activity, stood anxiously in the doorway. "What's happening?" Margaret Matthews asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. David wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, both of them watching intently as the doctor worked. Dr. Williams carefully examined Sarah's responses to various stimuli. The girl's fingers continued their slight movements, and her eyelids showed subtle fluttering. These were promising signs. The doctor remained cautiously optimistic. "There's definitely increased neurological activity," Dr. Williams explained to the parents. "These are positive signs, but we need to monitor her closely. Every coma case is different, and we don't want to make any premature assumptions." Jennifer stayed in the room even after her other duties called, feeling drawn to remain close by. She watched as Sarah's breathing pattern changed slightly, becoming more natural and less mechanical. The girl's chest rose and fell with a new rhythm, as if she was slowly fighting her way back to consciousness. The next few hours brought more small changes. Sarah's hand would occasionally twitch, and her facial muscles showed minimal movement. These might seem like tiny developments to an outsider, but to Jennifer and the medical team, they were significant milestones. Around 4 a.m., something extraordinary happened. While Jennifer was adjusting Sarah's blanket, she noticed goosebumps on the girl's arms. A physical response to the cool hospital air. This was new. It was the first sign of her body responding to environmental stimuli since the accident. "Sarah?" Jennifer spoke softly, holding the child's small hand. "If you can hear me, try to squeeze my fingers." For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, ever so slightly, Jennifer felt the weakest pressure against her hand. It was barely noticeable, but it was there, a deliberate response to her request. Dr. Williams was called back immediately to document this development. He performed another series of tests while Sarah's parents watched with tears in their eyes. The doctor's usually serious face showed a hint of a smile as he recorded his observations. "These are very encouraging signs," he told the Matthews family. "Her brain is showing increased activity, and she's beginning to respond to external stimuli. However, we need to remember that recovery from a coma is often a gradual process." Throughout the rest of the night shift, Jennifer stayed close to Sarah's room. She talked to the girl continuously, offering gentle encouragement and updating her on everything happening around her. The other nurses noticed Jennifer's dedication but understood it. They had all had patients who touched their hearts in special ways. As the night progressed, Sarah's vital signs continued to strengthen. Her brain activity showed more regular patterns, and her random movements became slightly more frequent. It was as if her body was slowly remembering how to function. Just before dawn, Jennifer was making her final rounds when she noticed something different about Sarah's face. The girl's expression had changed subtly, showing small movements that hadn't been present before. It wasn't quite a grimace or a smile, but it was definitely a change from the peaceful blankness that had characterized her features for the past 3 weeks. As the morning shift prepared to take over, Jennifer updated her colleagues on all the night's developments. She felt both excited and anxious about leaving, knowing that something significant was happening. Little did she know that the most extraordinary part of Sarah's awakening was yet to come, and would challenge everything she thought she knew about consciousness and reality. The next evening, Jennifer arrived for her shift with a sense of anticipation. The day staff had reported continued improvements in Sarah's condition, with more frequent movements and stronger vital signs. As she walked into room 304, she found Dr. Williams discussing the latest developments with the Matthews family. "Sarah's brain activity has increased significantly over the past 24 hours. Dr. Williams explained, pointing to the charts. "These patterns suggest she may be moving into a lighter state of unconsciousness." Margaret Matthews hadn't left her daughter's side all day, her eyes red from exhaustion and crying. David looked equally worn out, his usual neat appearance showing signs of the strain they'd been under. Jennifer could see they desperately needed rest. "Mr. and Mrs. Matthews," Jennifer said gently, "you both look exhausted. Why don't you go home for a proper night's sleep? I'll be here with Sarah all night, and I promise to call you immediately if there's any change." The parents hesitated, looking at their daughter's still form. After some gentle persuasion from both Jennifer and Dr. Williams, they finally agreed. It would be their first night away from the hospital since the accident. "Call us for anything, no matter how small," Margaret insisted as David helped her gather their things. Jennifer assured them she would keep them informed of even the slightest change. Once the parents left, Jennifer settled into her evening routine. She checked Sarah's vital signs, adjusted her medications, and began her usual one-sided conversation with the girl. Over the past few weeks, she had told Sarah about her own life, her favorite books, and funny stories about her cat, Max. "Your mom and dad are getting some rest tonight," Jennifer explained as she worked. "But don't worry, I'll be right here with you." Around midnight, Jennifer noticed something new. Sarah's eyes were moving rapidly beneath her closed lids. REM sleep, something they hadn't seen before. It was another positive sign that her brain function was improving. The night progressed quietly until about 2 a.m., when Sarah's monitors showed a sudden spike in brain activity. Jennifer watched as the girl's face twitched, her fingers curled, and her breathing pattern changed. These weren't the random movements from before. They seemed more coordinated, more purposeful. Jennifer pressed the call button for Dr. Williams, who had stayed late to monitor Sarah's condition. He arrived quickly and began examining the girl, his experienced hands gentle but thorough. "Her responses are getting stronger," he noted, watching as Sarah's hand moved in reaction to a light touch. The next 24 to 48 hours could be crucial. Throughout the rest of the night, Sarah showed increasing signs of awareness. Her body would respond to touch and sound, and her facial expressions changed more frequently. Jennifer maintained her vigil, talking softly to Sarah and documenting every new development. As dawn approached, something extraordinary happened. While Jennifer was checking Sarah's IV, she heard a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Looking down, she saw Sarah's lips move slightly, as if she was trying to speak. "Sarah?" Jennifer leaned closer, her heart racing. "Can you hear me?" There was no verbal response, but Sarah's head turned slightly toward Jennifer's voice, the most definitive movement they'd seen yet. Jennifer quickly documented this new development and called Dr. Williams again. The morning shift was arriving as Dr. Williams completed his examination. The other nurses gathered around, all of them invested in Sarah's recovery. They had watched Jennifer's dedication to the young patient and shared in her hope for the girl's recovery. "Her responses are dramatically improved," Dr. Williams announced. "While we can't predict exactly when she'll wake up, these are very promising signs." Jennifer prepared to hand over to the day shift nurse, providing a detailed report of the night's events. As she gathered her things to leave, she felt a strange sensation, almost like electricity in the air. Something told her that Sarah was closer to waking up than anyone realized. Looking back at the sleeping child one last time before leaving, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something unprecedented was about to happen. Little did she know that her next shift would bring an encounter that would shake her understanding of reality to its very core. When Jennifer arrived for her next night shift, there was a palpable energy in the pediatric ICU. The day staff reported that Sarah had shown increased responsiveness throughout the day, with more frequent movements and stronger reactions to stimuli. The Matthews family had returned, refreshed from their night at home, and their renewed hope was contagious. "She squeezed my hand today," Margaret told Jennifer excitedly. It was different from before, stronger, more deliberate. Jennifer smiled as she began her evening checks. Sarah's vital signs were indeed stronger than ever, and her color had improved noticeably. The girl's face seemed more relaxed, almost peaceful, compared to the blank expression she had worn for weeks. "Try to get some rest in the waiting room," Jennifer suggested to the parents. "I'll come get you if anything changes." Reluctantly, they agreed, knowing they needed to stay strong for their daughter. The night settled into its usual quiet rhythm. Jennifer moved between her patients, but found herself spending extra time in Sarah's room. Something felt different tonight, a subtle change in the atmosphere that her years of nursing experience had taught her to notice. Around midnight, while Jennifer was adjusting Sarah's IV, she noticed the girl's fingers moving in a pattern. Not the random twitches from before, but something that looked almost like she was trying to grasp something. "Sarah?" Jennifer spoke softly, taking the girl's hand. "Can you hear me?" The monitors showed a spike in brain activity. Sarah's breathing changed, becoming quicker and more irregular. Jennifer watched, hardly daring to breathe herself, as Sarah's facial muscles began to twitch. Then, at exactly 12:17 a.m., it happened. Sarah's eyes fluttered, not the random movements they'd seen before, but a deliberate attempt to open. Jennifer pressed the call button immediately, her other hand still holding Sarah's. Dr. Williams arrived just as Sarah's eyes began to open fully. For the first time in nearly 4 weeks, they could see her brown eyes, eyes that had been hidden behind closed lids for so long. Get her parents. Dr. Williams ordered another nurse while he began examining Sarah. Jennifer stayed where she was, still holding the girl's hand, her heart pounding with excitement and anxiety. The Matthews family rushed in, Margaret letting out a small cry when she saw her daughter's open eyes. But something wasn't quite right. Sarah's gaze was unusually focused for someone just waking from a coma. Too alert, too aware. Jennifer felt a chill run down her spine as Sarah's eyes locked onto hers. The look in them was not that of a confused, newly awakened 6-year-old. There was something else there, something older, deeper, more knowing. The room fell silent as Sarah's lips began to move. Everyone leaned in, expecting the confused mumbling typical of coma patients. But what happened next would change everything. Sarah turned her head slightly, her eyes still fixed on Jennifer. Her voice, when it came, was clear and strong, nothing like the voice of a child who hadn't spoken in weeks. The 5 words she spoke seemed to freeze time itself. You didn't mean to die. Jennifer felt the blood drain from her face. Her legs went weak, and she had to grab the bed rail for support. Those words, those exact words, were the last thing her brother had said to her 15 years ago, just before he passed away in a similar accident. It was something she had never told anyone at the hospital, a private grief she had carried alone. The room erupted into activity. Dr. Williams was calling out orders, nurses were checking vital signs, and the Matthews family was crying with joy at their daughter's awakening. But Jennifer stood rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. Sarah's eyes had closed again, her face relaxing into what appeared to be natural sleep. The monitors showed stable vital signs, everything looking exactly as it should for a patient waking from a coma. But Jennifer knew that what had just happened was far from normal. As she watched Sarah's peaceful face, questions raced through her mind. How could this child possibly know those words? What did it mean? And most importantly, what else did Sarah know? The night shift continued, but nothing would ever be the same. Jennifer knew she had just witnessed something that defied medical explanation, something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the mysteries that lay between them. The next few hours in the pediatric ICU were a blur of activity. Dr. Williams and his team conducted numerous tests on Sarah, while her parents hovered nearby, their faces a mixture of joy and concern. Jennifer moved through her duties mechanically, still shaken by Sarah's inexplicable words. Her vital signs are stable, and her responses are remarkably good for someone just out of a coma, Dr. Williams announced to the group. However, we need to monitor her closely for the next 24 hours. Sarah had drifted into what appeared to be natural sleep shortly after her mysterious awakening. The medical team assured the Matthews family that this was normal. Patients often cycled between wakefulness and sleep after emerging from a coma. Around 3 a.m., when things had quieted down, Jennifer found herself alone with Sarah again. The girl's eyes opened slowly, and this time she looked more like the 6-year-old she was, confused and slightly frightened. "Where's Mommy?" Sarah asked in a small, childlike voice, completely different from her earlier tone. Jennifer pressed the call button for the parents while responding gently. "They're just outside, sweetheart. They'll be here in a second." Margaret and David rushed in, embracing their daughter carefully around the medical equipment. Sarah showed no signs of remembering her earlier awakening or the strange words she had spoken. She was exactly what you'd expect, a frightened child looking for comfort from her parents. Later, during her break, Jennifer sat alone in the staff room, her coffee growing cold as she replayed the events in her mind. Her brother's accident had happened 15 years ago, on a rainy night much like the one that had put Sarah in the hospital. His last words, "He didn't mean to die," had referred to the other driver who had swerved to avoid a deer and hit him instead. Jennifer had never shared this story with anyone at the hospital. Dr. Williams found her there, still lost in thought. "Nurse Hayes, is everything all right? You seem shaken." Jennifer hesitated before speaking. "Doctor, when Sarah first woke up, did you notice anything unusual about her voice or behavior?" The doctor sat down across from her. Patients coming out of comas often exhibit unusual behaviors. The brain takes time to fully reconnect with reality. But Jennifer knew this was different. She carefully explained what had happened, the adult-like voice, the words that matched her brother's exactly. Dr. Williams listened thoughtfully, making notes in his pad. "I've seen similar cases," he said finally. "Sometimes, patients in comas report experiences we can't explain medically. We should document this, but let's keep it between us for now. We don't want to alarm the family." When Jennifer returned to Sarah's room, the girl was awake again, talking softly with her mother about her favorite stuffed elephant. She showed no sign of recognition when Jennifer entered, no hint of the mysterious knowledge she had displayed earlier. Throughout the rest of the shift, Sarah continued to improve. She responded well to basic neurological tests, recognized her parents and her favorite toys, and even managed to eat a few spoonfuls of Jell-O. But she had no memory of the time she spent in the coma, nor of her first awakening. As morning approached, Jennifer observed Sarah closely while updating her charts. The girl was sleeping peacefully now, looking exactly like any other 6-year-old patient. Yet Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something profound and unexplainable. Just before the end of her shift, Sarah opened her eyes again and looked directly at Jennifer. For a brief moment, that same knowing look passed across her face, but when she spoke, it was with her normal child's voice, asking for a drink of water. Jennifer left work that morning with more questions than answers. How had Sarah known about her brother? What had the girl experienced during those weeks of unconsciousness? And most importantly, what other mysteries might be revealed as she continued to recover? As she drove home in the early morning light, Jennifer realized that her understanding of life, death, and consciousness had been forever changed. Something extraordinary had happened in room 304, something that medical science couldn't explain, and she had a feeling that this was only the beginning. In the days following Sarah's awakening, the pediatric ECU settled into a new routine. Sarah continued to make remarkable progress, regaining her strength and showing all the typical behaviors of a 6-year-old girl. Jennifer, however, couldn't forget the inexplicable incident from that first night. During her evening shift, Jennifer noticed that Sarah had started talking about dreams she'd had while sleeping. At first, the medical staff dismissed these as typical childhood imagination, but there was something different about these stories. "The lady in the white dress showed me around," Sarah told Jennifer one quiet evening while her parents were getting coffee. "She said lots of people were waiting in the bright place, but it wasn't my time yet." Jennifer felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The description matched something her brother had said during his final moments, about a woman in white who helped guide people to the other side. She had never shared this detail with anyone. Dr. Williams began documenting these conversations, noting how Sarah would shift between her normal childlike demeanor and moments of startling insight. During one examination, Sarah suddenly looked at him and said, "Your daughter forgives you for missing her recital. She knows you were saving someone else's daddy that night." The doctor had frozen in place, his pen hovering above the chart. His daughter's dance recital had been 15 years ago, and he had indeed missed it to perform emergency surgery. No one at the hospital knew this personal detail of his life. Meanwhile, Sarah's physical recovery continued to impress everyone. Her motor skills returned rapidly, and soon she was sitting up in bed, coloring pictures and playing with toys. During the day, she was just like any other child, asking for her favorite foods and watching cartoons. But the nights were different. Jennifer noticed that Sarah became more talkative about her dreams during the quiet hours, especially around midnight. She would speak of people and places she couldn't possibly have known about. One night, while Jennifer was checking her vital signs, Sarah suddenly grabbed her hand. "Your brother says the accident wasn't your fault," she said in that same adult voice from her first awakening. "He wants you to stop feeling guilty about not driving him that night." Jennifer had to sit down, her legs weak. She had always blamed herself for not offering to drive her brother home that rainy night 15 years ago. It was a guilt she had carried silently ever since. Margaret and David Matthews struggled to make sense of their daughter's behavior. During the day, she was their normal little girl, but they couldn't ignore the strange things she would say at night. They consulted with child psychologists, who were equally puzzled by the situation. "It's like she brought something back with her," Margaret confided in Jennifer one evening. Sometimes she knows things she couldn't possibly know, talks about places she's never been. The medical staff began keeping a detailed record of Sarah's unusual statements and behaviors. Dr. Williams, initially skeptical, found himself increasingly intrigued by the case. He started researching similar incidents in medical literature, finding scattered reports of coma patients who returned with inexplicable knowledge or abilities. Jennifer kept her own private journal of Sarah's statements, particularly those that connected to her brother. Each entry seemed to confirm what she had suspected since that first night, that Sarah had somehow accessed knowledge from beyond the normal boundaries of consciousness. As the days passed, these episodes became less frequent. Sarah spent more time being her regular 6-year-old self, though she would occasionally say something that would stop everyone in their tracks. The medical team noticed that her unusual insights often brought comfort to people, as if she was delivering messages they needed to hear. One evening, while helping Sarah with her dinner, Jennifer finally found the courage to ask, "Sarah, do you remember what you see or say during these moments?" Sarah looked at her with clear, innocent eyes. "Sometimes," she said simply. "But the lady in white told me I won't remember much soon. She said it's better that way." Jennifer nodded, understanding that whatever door had opened during Sarah's coma was slowly closing. But the impact of what had happened would remain with all of them, a reminder that there were mysteries in the world that science couldn't explain. 7. As Sarah's recovery progressed, Dr. Williams began noticing patterns in her unusual behaviors. While reviewing patient records, he discovered that several of Sarah's inexplicable statements connected directly to other patients who had been in comas in the same ward over the past decade. One particular evening, Sarah was coloring in her bed when she suddenly looked up at a newly admitted coma patient across the hall. "Tommy likes trains too," she said matter-of-factly. "The red one in his grandpa's attic is his favorite." The statement sent chills through the ward because Tommy, the teenage boy in a coma following a skateboarding accident, had never met Sarah. Yet when his family visited later, they confirmed that their son's most prized possession was indeed a vintage red train set kept in his grandfather's attic. Jennifer started documenting these connections more systematically. She created a detailed chart linking Sarah's statements to specific patients, past and present. The pattern was undeniable. Sarah seemed to have knowledge of personal details about other coma patients that she couldn't possibly have known. "It's like she was with them somehow," Jennifer explained to Dr. Williams during a late-night consultation. "As if while she was in her coma, she connected with other patients in similar states." The hospital administration took notice of the situation. Dr. Williams was asked to present Sarah's case to the medical board, carefully explaining the inexplicable aspects of her recovery. Initially skeptical, the board members became increasingly interested as they reviewed the documented evidence. Sarah's parents struggled to process these developments. They watched their daughter alternate between being a normal child and a mysterious messenger of hidden truths. During one particularly emotional moment, Sarah turned to her father and spoke about his own father, who had died before she was born. "Grandpa Jack says he's sorry he never got to teach you to fish," she said quietly. "But he watches you teach me, and it makes him happy." David Matthews had to leave the room, overwhelmed by the mention of his father's unfulfilled wish to pass on his love of fishing, something he had never discussed with his daughter. The medical staff began documenting similar cases from other hospitals. Reports emerged of other coma patients who had returned with unexpected knowledge or abilities. Dr. Williams started corresponding with researchers around the country who were studying these phenomena. One afternoon, while Sarah was playing with her stuffed animals, she suddenly became very still. Looking at Jennifer, she spoke in that now familiar adult voice. "Others like me are waking up. They're remembering too. It's happening more now." The statement proved prophetic. Within weeks, the hospital received reports of similar cases from other pediatric wards across the country. Children emerging from comas with knowledge they couldn't possibly possess, speaking of experiences that defied explanation. Jennifer spent hours recording and cross-referencing these cases, finding striking similarities. Many of the children spoke of the same lady in white Sarah had mentioned. They described similar experiences of moving between different patients' consciousness while in their comas. The scientific community was divided on how to approach these cases. Some dismissed them as coincidences or the result of heightened perception during coma states. Others saw them as evidence of something more profound about human consciousness. Sarah's own episodes began to decrease in frequency as she grew stronger, but each one continued to bring meaningful messages to those around her. She spoke to grieving families, offering comfort with details only their lost loved ones could have known. She helped other patients by sharing insights about their conditions that even the doctors hadn't discovered. One night, as Jennifer was finishing her rounds, Sarah called her over. "The messages will stop soon," she said softly, "but they want you to know that it's real. All of it. They want you to help others understand." Jennifer nodded, already knowing in her heart what she would do with this experience. She had begun writing a detailed account of everything she had witnessed, hoping to help others who might encounter similar cases in the future. As she watched Sarah drift off to sleep, Jennifer reflected on how this one small patient had changed everything. The mysterious awakening had opened doors of understanding that could never be closed again, challenging the boundaries between science and the unexplainable. 6 months after Sarah's remarkable awakening, she returned to St. Mary's Hospital for her final checkup. The pediatric IQ staff gathered to welcome her, amazed by her transformation. The small, fragile girl from room 304 had become a vibrant, healthy child again, her pigtails bouncing as she ran down the hallway. Jennifer, who had been waiting for this visit, felt tears in her eyes as Sarah rushed to hug her. The connection they had formed during those mysterious nights remained strong, even though Sarah now remembered very little of her unusual experiences. "Look what I made for you," Sarah exclaimed, holding up a colorful drawing. It showed two figures surrounded by bright light. One was clearly Jennifer, and the other, Jennifer realized with a catch in her throat, looked remarkably like her brother. Dr. Williams conducted his examination, noting with satisfaction that Sarah's recovery was complete. Her medical file had become one of the most studied cases in the hospital's history, spawning a groundbreaking research project on consciousness during coma states. The study has already included 50 similar cases from around the country, Dr. Williams explained to the Matthews family. Sarah's experience opened our eyes to something we never fully understood before. Jennifer had become a key part of this research. Her detailed documentation of Sarah's case had provided the foundation for a new approach to treating coma patients. Hospitals across the country had begun implementing protocols she helped develop, encouraging staff to pay attention to unusual patterns and experiences during recovery. "Other nurses tell me their patients are speaking more openly about their experiences now," Jennifer told Margaret and David. "It's like Sarah gave them permission to share what they went through." Sarah's case had changed the hospital in other ways too. The pediatric AQ had established a special program for coma patients, incorporating what they had learned about consciousness and connection. Families were encouraged to share their stories, and staff were trained to document unexpected occurrences. During their visit, Sarah walked through the ward, stopping at room 304. Though she didn't remember much from her time there, she turned to Jennifer with a knowing look. "The lady in white still visits here sometimes," she said quietly. "She helps the other sleeping children find their way back." Jennifer had grown used to these occasional glimpses of Sarah's lingering connection to whatever she had experienced during her coma. They came less frequently now, but each one carried the same sense of profound truth that had marked her earlier awakening. The research team had compiled their findings into a comprehensive study, now pending publication in several medical journals. While they couldn't explain everything that had happened, they had documented enough similar cases to suggest that consciousness during comas was far more complex than previously believed. "Your daughter helped us understand something important," Dr. Williams told the Matthews family. "We may not have all the answers. We know now that there's more to healing than what we can measure with machines." As they prepared to leave, Sarah handed Jennifer one last drawing. This one showed the pediatric IQ filled with light, with small figures floating between the beds. "It's what I remember sometimes in my dreams," she explained. "Everyone connected by the light." Jennifer carefully added the drawing to her collection of documentation about Sarah's case. Over the months, she had gathered everything into a book, combining medical observations with personal accounts of the inexplicable events they had witnessed. Publishers had already expressed interest, recognizing the potential impact of the story. "Will you come visit us?" Sarah asked as she hugged Jennifer goodbye. "Mom says you can come for my birthday next month." Jennifer promised she would, knowing that her connection with this remarkable child would continue long after the medical mysteries had faded. Sarah had changed not just her understanding of medicine, but her entire worldview. As she watched the Matthews family leave the hospital, Jennifer reflected on how one small patient had initiated such profound changes. Sarah's mysterious awakening had opened new paths of research, challenged medical assumptions, and brought hope to countless other families facing similar situations. The pediatric IQ returned to its normal routine, but it was forever changed. In room 304 and beyond, they now knew that between life and death, consciousness and sleep, there existed possibilities that science was only beginning to understand. And it had taken a 6-year-old girl to show them the way.